So, as many people know, today was actually the Apple event where they announced new upcoming products, and in today's video, I'm going to be going over what those products are and my thoughts on them. So let's jump in. So they started off the event with the iPad, the budget iPad called iPad, and it was actually not terrible. All they did was they added the A14 chip, I believe, talked about some old accessories, talked about the old Apple Pencil, just kind of dwelling on the past, but that is actually the only iPad right now that uses the Lightning port, and I'll get into that in a bit. After they talked about that iPad, then they moved their attention to the iPad mini. They actually did a complete redesign on the iPad mini, and they actually made it look like an iPad Air. So they added Touch ID in the fingerprint sensor, pretty familiar. They added a new camera on the back, looks exactly like the Air. They added USB-C to the iPad, which is very nice. The old iPad will be the only iPad left on the lineup that uses the Lightning port. And they also talked about 5G. They're notorious for talking about 5G for on and on. So then they talked about this new A15 chip that they invented this year. So it's a 6 CPU core chip, and I believe 4 GPU core chip. Seems pretty fast. Talked about the capabilities, just how like 50% faster than the last gen or whatever. Moving on to the Apple Watch. So they announced the Apple Watch Series 7. This wasn't the biggest update ever, but they did actually do a design refresh. They added a bigger screen, which allowed you to actually be able to text with a keyboard. I can't imagine doing that. They talked about the durability for a long time, how apparently it's more dust resistant and able to withstand like rocks and stuff. And they added fast charging to the Apple Watch, so that means you can use a USB-C to iPad, and now it should be like 33% faster. So they were bragging about that for a while. Now time to talk about the iPhone 13. There's not much excitement to see, but under the hood there are some changes that were made. For starters, I didn't realize this when I first saw it, but there is a slimmer notch, which is cool. Less notchy. The main features that they talked about on stage was the battery life, supposedly much better than the previous generation. Boring. They talked about the A15 chip a lot, saying how this is going to, revolutionize everything, and it's faster and it's more responsive. And one thing that they spent way too long on the event talking about was this thing called cinematic mode. Cinematographers will rack focus, basically where you change from one focus point to another, and they added essentially portrait mode but for video. So now you can have fake depth of field but in video. It's kind of cool. They talked about how this is going to revolutionize Hollywood. I disagree. So now off to the this was the biggest product announced at the Apple event, which was the iPhone 13 Pro. Like the 13, they added slimmer bezels. They talked a lot about the cameras. So one of them was that they added the wide angle lens now as autofocus. It's a macro lens, so you can get macro shots. So they talked about that for way too long. They also talked about rack focus mode again, and that you can shoot ProRes video, which is actually kind of exciting, and I personally would use it until I learned that it can't be on the 128 gig model. You can shoot 1080p ProRes on the 128, but you have to pay for the 256 and up to get that. Speaking of storage, they added 1 terabyte of storage on the new iPhone, which is crazy. They added ProMotion to the iPhone 13 Pro. That's really exciting. So you get 120 hertz action, and it speeds up. It's like the iPad where it speeds up when motion is there, but then when it's just you're reading text, it can slow it down to 3 hertz. That way, you don't kill, you absolutely murder your battery life. So 120 hertz on the Pro, really like that. That's a very good feature. Now let's move on to what are my thoughts. Overall, I thought this Apple event was very good, except it was just kind of boring. It wasn't anything really revolutionary. There wasn't any new feature at this Apple event that I feel was just not in a previous Apple product. The iPad mini was just another version of the iPad Air, just put in smaller. The iPhone 12 Pro, ProMotion was on the iPads. They added a new camera, that's nice. They added a new chip, that's new every year. This is definitely not the year I think people are gonna be like, oh my gosh, the 13 Pro. It's oh, you have a 13 Pro, I can't even tell. iPad mini has been really needing a refresh, and I'm glad they got a refresh, but not even a single feature different on the mini. And then finally, the Apple Watch. The watch didn't really add a new feature. Faster charging, that's useful. In conclusion, I really liked this Apple event, and it was a good minor update event. I wasn't personally expecting something revolutionary. Just a little disappointed about AirPods, but that's fine. I think the mini was well needed. The phones are cool, but yeah, that's my thoughts on the event. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.